The story of disco is the story of a decade that refused to sit still. A decade that loved glitter, gold lame, platform shoes tall enough to cause altitude sickness, and dance floors that lit up like they were powered by pure optimism. The 1970s were loud, colorful, and completely unashamed, and nothing captured the era's wild, joyful energy quite like disco. But here's the thing about disco. Depending on who you ask, it was either the greatest dance revolution in history or the musical equivalent of adding too much sugar to your cereal. People loved it. People hated it. People danced to it even if they claimed they didn't. And whether you were living it up on the dance floor or hiding behind the nearest speaker pretending to tie your shoe until the song ended, disco was unavoidable. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the glitter-soaked rise of disco, the good, the bad, and the downright glittery. And trust me, there's a lot of glitter. We begin in the early 1970s, long before John Travolta put on that iconic white suit and pointed to the sky like he was asking divine permission to dance. Disco didn't start in neon-lit clubs or movie soundtracks. It began in small underground spaces, clubs in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, packed with communities who needed a place where they could be free, expressive, loud, proud, and unapologetically themselves. Disco was born in the margins. Black, Latino, and LGBTQ+ communities who created a world where the dance floor wasn't just a place to dance, it was a place to live, a place to breathe, a place where nobody cared what you looked like as long as you were vibing with the music. DJs mixed soul, funk, Latin rhythms, and early electronic beats to create something new, something hypnotic, something that pulled people in like a magnet covered in sequins. By 1973, disco had a pulse. By 1974, it had legs. And by 1975, disco was sprinting in knee-high boots with a feather boa trailing behind it. One of the biggest early sparks came from Gloria Gaynor's Never Can Say Goodbye, which spun through clubs like a comet made of pure emotion. Meanwhile, Barry White was out there seducing every living room in America with his velvet voice and lush orchestration. The man could read a tax return and still make it sound romantic. But disco wasn't just about crooning and romance. It was about movement, rhythm, and the beat that made your shoulders start swaying even if you swore you weren't dancing. And that's where KC and the Sunshine Band blasted onto the scene like a gold-plated freight train. Get down tonight. That's the way, I like it. These songs didn't ask you to dance, they commanded you. KC had brass, funk, melody, and enough rhythmic energy to power Miami during hurricane season. Their songs were irresistible, and disco officially had its first mainstream juggernaut. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, a group of producers, known as Philly Soul, architects Gamble, Huff, and Bell, were creating a smoother, richer disco sound. They gave us the OJs, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, the Tramps, and the musical DNA that disco would evolve from. The Tramps' Disco Inferno wasn't just a song, it was an anthem, a mission statement, and quite possibly the most accurate description of a 70s dance floor at 2 a.m. By now, disco had traction, but it needed one thing to become unstoppable. And it came in the form of a club that only opened its doors to you if you had style, attitude, and the confidence of someone who knew exactly how good they looked. That club was Studio 54. Studio 54 wasn't just a nightclub, it was a cultural explosion wrapped in velvet ropes. It was the kind of place where you could be dancing next to Mick Jagger, Liza Minnelli, Andy Warhol, or some random guy wearing a cape made entirely of tinsel. Fashion designers, models, musicians, actors, millionaires, and people who simply radiated fabulous energy all packed into one disco paradise. Drugs everywhere, champagne, flowing, outfits, questionable but iconic. The vibe, unmatched. Studio 54 didn't just celebrate disco, it turned it into a lifestyle. If the 1970s had a beating heart, it was located right on that illuminated dance floor. But as disco rose, so did its signature fashion choices. Let's talk about that for a second. Platform shoes tall enough to sprain an ankle with a single confident step. Polyester shirts so shiny they could reflect satellite signals. Bell bottoms wide enough to double as parachutes. And colors. My God, the colors. Mustard yellow, lime green, burnt orange, electric blue. The 70s said, subtle? Never heard of her? Disco fashion didn't whisper. It shouted, it screamed. It made sure the whole world knew you had arrived, even if you were arriving late because you couldn't zip up your jumpsuit. On top of that, the disco sound became bigger, louder, and more orchestral. Horn sections, string sections, funky bass lines, four-on-the-floor beats. Producers like Giorgio Moroder, the wizard of electronic disco, started pushing boundaries with synthesizers, giving us Donna Summer's iconic hits. Ah, Donna Summer, the queen of disco. When she breathed onto a microphone, the world listened. Songs like I Feel Love, Hot Stuff, and Last Dance didn't just chart, they detonated across dance floors. Donna Summer was the sound of disco's peak. She owned the late 70s with enough presence to make other artists rethink their career choices. Then you had the Bee Gees, three brothers who accidentally became disco royalty. Before Saturday Night Fever, they were known for soft rock. After Saturday Night Fever, they were unavoidable. Their falsetto harmonies, funky rhythms, and perfectly coiffed chest hair became synonymous with disco. Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, More Than a Woman, You Should Be Dancing. They weren't just hits, they were entire cultural events. And speaking of cultural events, it's time to address the elephant on the dance floor. Saturday Night Fever. John Travolta's white suit didn't just break barriers. It became a symbol of the entire era. That posture, the finger point, the strut, it turned disco into a mainstream monster. Suddenly, everyone wanted to dance. Everyone wanted to be sexy. Everyone wanted to find themselves under a mirrored disco ball, spinning slowly overhead. Saturday Night Fever turned disco from a movement into a global phenomenon. The soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums in history and still sits on that throne today. Disco wasn't just music anymore. It was a lifestyle. And at its peak, the disco wave felt unstoppable. But if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that humans love a trend until they decide they hate the trend. And disco's downfall came just as fast and just as dramatic as its rise. By 1979, people were starting to push back. Rock fans were annoyed their local stations were suddenly playing Donna Summer instead of the Rolling Stones. Traditionalists didn't like the electronic direction. And record labels, seeing easy money, started churning out cheap, disposable disco tracks like they were printing coupons. Everything was disco-fied. Country disco, rock disco, polka disco. If you could put a beat under it, someone tried. Then came the infamous event that officially marked disco's cultural backlash. Disco Demolition Night, July 12, 1979. A Chicago radio DJ, furious about disco's dominance, encouraged baseball fans to bring disco records to be blown up between games. And they did. Thousands of people poured in, chanting, throwing records, lighting them on fire, watching the spectacle. The explosion wasn't just literal, it symbolized the moment the tide turned. Overnight, labels dropped disco acts. Radio stations pulled disco songs from rotation. Artists rebranded. Producers went underground or moved into the emerging 80s electropop scene. But here's the thing, disco didn't die that night, it just evolved. The spirit of disco, the rhythm, the beat, the freedom, the diversity, lived on. It became the backbone of house music in Chicago, dance music in Europe, electronic pop in the 80s, and nearly every club track that has dominated the charts since. Without disco, there is no EDM, no club music, no dance pop, no Daft Punk, no Dua Lipa, no Beyoncé dance-era renaissance. Disco walked so future artists could moonwalk, shuffle, vogue, twerk, and everything else. Today, people look back on disco with love. The fashion, iconic in its ridiculousness. The music, timeless. The dance floors, pure joy. And the legacy, unshakable. Disco was more than a genre. It was movement and freedom. It was people coming together under the glow of spinning lights to celebrate life, identity, and connection. It was community, expression, rhythm, and most importantly, fun. Pure, unapologetic fun. So whether you lived it firsthand or you're just discovering it through retro playlists and questionable Halloween costumes, one thing is certain: disco deserves its flowers. Glittery, sparkly neon flowers. Tell me in the comments, what was your disco moment? Your favorite disco track? Your favorite memory from the dance floor? Real or imagined? And if you enjoyed this trip through the good, the bad, and the undeniably glittery, hit like, subscribe, and keep that turntable spinning. More nostalgia is on the way.